attendees. Okay. Welcome everyone out there joining us today. I'm going to give it a couple minutes to make sure we get everyone a chance to log in, and we'll get started. Maybe I'll look for a goal of 50 at least of our 250 registered, and then we'll get rolling. Okay, again, everyone, just checking your audios and everything. I'm giving it a few more minutes when we hit 50 on the attendee list, we'll go ahead and roll. We have about over 250 that registered, so I think that'll be our metric. Oh, we're at 48. Okay, 2 to go. Countdown. We hit 50. Okay. We'll probably have a lot more people coming in based on our registration, but I want to respect everyone's time that are here now. So good morning. I'm Rebecca Flora, Secretary, Maryland Department of Planning and Chair of the Sustainable Growth Subcabinet. I want to welcome everyone to our public forum meeting today. We changed it up a little bit this year. We had been doing one of our required 2 public forums at MACO each year, but we found that it limits the participation a bit, and virtual seems to work for the most number of people. And so we'll be doing a second public forum in December, and just wanted to try to get as many people engaged as possible with what's going on with sustainable growth in Maryland and our subcabinet. And so we are expecting several more. We're encouraging everyone to use the Q&A, which Maggie Courier, who's been helping to organize all of this, will be explaining in a few minutes. But right now, I'm going to go ahead and move into roll call for our Sustainable Growth Subcabinet members so that you'll know which agencies that are members of the subcabinet are actually here today. And obviously, with logistics, we may have a few more join ultimately. So let me just go ahead to the next. Oh, let's go to the agenda first. Actually, it's next in our sequencing here. And then we'll do roll call. Okay, so we'll do roll call. We're going to go over some of the policy and implementation and some of the activities that have occurred in the past fiscal year, and particularly these last 6 months since our last public forum. We're going to share a few just quick hit legislative highlights of what came out of the last sessions that are most relevant to this topic area. And then we have several agencies teed up to share with you specific work that they're doing within the agency members of the subcabinet that they wanted to share with you about some of the activity that's directly related to our sustainable growth agenda. And then just a early notice that the Sustainable Growth Awards are coming up again. That we want to get as many nominations in as possible. And then during our closing round, which I want to make sure I reserve time for, actually probably want to try to get to that by 10:45, which is when I'll be asking the subcabinet members to be monitoring the Q&A as we go. We'll do 2 things with the Q&A. One, we will be downloading the Q&A so that we are capturing all of your thoughts, comments, questions, and sharing it with the whole subcabinet, because we may not get to all of them. But then to the extent that we can pull out a few, or the subcabinet members see some that they want to address specifically during the closing round, we'll do it at that time also. And so that's our game plan. And let's just go ahead to the first opening round of identifying who is here. If you could go to that one. Okay, I'm just going to go through by agency, and if you could identify who's representing the agency today, and we'll start with DHCD.
Good morning, Julia Glantz is present.
Hi, Julia. Okay, MDA.
Hi, good morning. This is Harrison Palmer, Chief of Staff, Department of Agriculture, representing Secretary Kevnetics.
Wonderful. Thank you, Harrison. We'll go on to DBM. Allison here. Okay, we'll keep moving. If someone joins, somebody chat me so they'll know. On Commerce.
Hi, Jim Palma, representing Commerce Secretary Harry Coker.
Wonderful. Thank you. MDEM.
Good morning. Mike Hinson, representing Secretary Russ Strickland.
Wonderful. Thanks, Mike. And MDE.
Hi, this is Secretary McIlwain. Happy to be here. I also have Suzanne Dorsey, my deputy, and she's going to help go through some of our talking points. So we're happy to be here.
Wonderful. Thank you both. Thanks for being here, Secretary and Suzanne. Okay, on to DGS. I know that Secretary Chaudhry is trying to get into the meeting, and I expect that we'll work out those logistics and he'll be joining us. Oh, Wendy, you're here in a few minutes.
I am here to support the secretary as needed, but he's hoping to join. Thank you.
Okay, wonderful. Thank you, Wendy. On to health. Do we have anyone from the Department of Health? Okay. Higher ed.
Hi, good morning. Buenos dias. Elena Quiroz Savon is serving as the interim secretary, and I'm joined by one of our analysts at MHEC, Dan Schuster.
Wonderful. Thank you, Secretary Acting, but we know soon. We'll have that all sorted out, and we have Dan, who I know is often with us, so thank you. So on to labor. Okay, keep moving. DNR.
Good morning, Secretary Kurtz here from DNR.
Wonderful. Thank you for being here, Secretary. MDOT.
Good morning. Jeff Anderson here, representing Secretary Katie Thompson.
Wonderful. Thanks, Jeff. And on to MEA. Okay, keep moving. And Assistant Secretary of DHCD, Office of Neighborhood Revitalization. We have a new face and name here. Carrie, are you with us?
Carrie's not, but Kevin is in the attendee room.
Okay, great. Wonderful. Thank you, Julia. Okay, and the governor's office. Anyone with us from there? Okay. Okay, and then on to the last but not least, the National Center for Smart Growth. Do we have Dr. Howell with us? Okay, Nick, are you out there? Okay. Okay, so that's where we're at. I think I may have seen a hand up from Secretary McIlwain. You good?
Yeah, hi. Secretary Flora, Suzanne is not able to get in. It's telling her that she's not invited as a panelist.
We'll work on that on the back end. Mary can send her a new link, I believe, and we'll work on that to get her in as a panelist.
Thanks.
Thank you. Okay, everyone. Thank you so much as we work through everything. And I see we're up to about 75 attendees at this point. So once again, thank you to all of our members out there from the public and other attendees joining us. We're going to go ahead and keep moving, and I'll just do a few reminders as we go. But let's go to the next slide, and Maggie Courier, our special projects person at MDP, is going to take you through some logistics about how we're handling Q&A today and anything else that might be helpful to folks. So Maggie, go ahead.
Yes, good morning, everyone. Thank you so much for joining the Sustainable Growth Subcabinet Open Forum. So since this is an open forum, we are really looking for engagement in our Q&A. So if you have any questions for our panelists today, please drop them in the Q&A and they will be able to respond via text through that Q&A, or those agencies who are presenting today will be able to address comments and questions in the closing round. I do just want to let everyone know that all of our speakers will be the ones who are representing their agency and presenting. So we do have more Sustainable Growth Agency representation than who is presenting at our meeting today. So you should be able to get responses from almost every agency. So thank you.
Thanks, Maggie. And I assume you can coordinate with Mary on the backside to make sure we've got the additional panelists included and have links. So I appreciate all of that and all the logistics to our team. Okay, so let's go ahead and get into the meat of today, which is starting with just the overall sustainable growth and policy. In terms of some of you that have been with us over the last few years with the Moore-Miller administration, you know that we've transitioned from SMART to sustainable growth. We still have statutory requirements as a subcabinet, but we've really started to focus around this broader definition of what is our strategic approach to land use policy and development practices, and really looking at equitably considering social, economic, and environmental implications, and broadening how we think about sustainability and how that relates to growth in the state of Maryland. But the end goal is thriving communities. How do we ensure that we have thriving communities in the state of Maryland? And with that, I'm going to turn it over to Chuck Boyd for the next two slides, who's the MDP Assistant Secretary of Planning Services, who's going to just give you the highlight of the activities that have happened during fiscal year 26, which is coming to a close, that the subcabinet has been working on, and the types of approvals that we review as a subcabinet, typically often coming up through the coordinating committee. So Chuck, go ahead.
Thank you, Secretary Flora. As you noted, that this is the end of FY26, and we did report on some of these activities last time, although we are continuing to work on many of these activities. But as Maggie will give to you later on, and will probably highlight a little bit, is that the Growth Awards has been a real important new or revamped program, and so we were excited about having that, the second one this year, and we're going to continue on moving forward with the Growth Awards. The Maryland the Beautiful Act report was approved by the subcabinet this year, and previously the subcabinet approved the plan as well as last year's annual report. One thing to note is that we have been working with MDOT and the other state agencies to align DHCD, particularly the sustainable communities program, and the TOD designation, to make it easier and more coordinated, so that that designation process is effective. There have been a statewide resiliency strategy headed up by MDEM that coordinated throughout the state agencies and worked with MDEM in assisting them with their strategy on that area. Also noting that this was highlighted previously, is the work on the Sustainable Growth Policies Planning Principle Implementation Guide, released earlier this year, and we're currently working on annual review of the metrics and the KPIs for that. And then finally, one of the things that will be highlighted a bit later on is the increased alignment between the comprehensive planning elements performed at the local level with the principals. And so there's been a lot of work with our state agency partners to identify data resources, technical assistance, and policies and programs to ensure that there's greater coordination among the state agencies, and then working with local governments as they do their comprehensive plan updates. Next slide, please. There are some actionable items that the subcabinet performs on a annual basis, an ongoing basis, some of which are performed by the coordinating committee. PFA exceptions are noted here that are often dealt with those things that can't be, that are state funded, growth related, but are not always able to be within the PFA. There are those exceptions that are handled through a process that the coordinator handles. They did 5 of them this year. All of them were really related to health and safety issues, typically extending water or sewer service to failing systems. Most likely a local property owner, or could be a mobile home park and a few other areas, but it's been a very important area to address those safety issues with those funding. We've obviously had Sustainable Communities program for many years, and we have a renewal process that the coordinating committee processes. And there were some new designations by the subcabinet itself, as well as some modifications to boundaries. And then finally, as noted earlier, there's been an uptick in the MDOT TOD program, and there were 2 designations this year. So that's a highlight of the FY26 activities. And back to you, Secretary.
Thank you, Chuck. There's a lot going on. I appreciate it. And people don't often realize all of these pieces that are actually part of our statutory requirements that we take very seriously and have a great team working on. Once again, just a reminder for any of the attendees that joined us after the introduction in the beginning, if you have questions, please put them in the Q&A. We won't be able to get to all of them. To the extent that any of us can respond quickly via the Q&A, we'll do that. And also during our closing round, I've asked the panelists, the subcabinet members, to try to weave in anything they can towards the end in our closing round. But we are also taking a transcript of everything so that we'll know what's on your mind out there and be able to review that with everyone toward the end. So just those reminders to everyone. With that, I'm going to go ahead, and I believe we now have all of our panelists officially in, which includes welcome Secretary Chaudhry and Dr. Howell have joined us as panelists now. And then I believe Deputy Secretary Suzanne Dorsey is also accessing as a panelist. Once we get into the presentation segment, that'll be helpful. So with that, we are going to turn to our legislative highlights, and Andrew Wilson from our MDP team is going to give you all just a few quick summary of some of the things that that we identified. Doesn't mean that it's all inclusive, that are directly related to overall sustainable growth mission as it relates to this particular type of work. So Andrew, over to you.
Thank you, Secretary Flora, and thank you everyone for joining today. The legislative session wrapped in mid-April. Just over 2,600 bills were introduced, and just shy of 900 of them became law. So as Secretary Flora mentioned, this is just a small selection of some of the bigger hits, and then some of the ones that may have missed the headlines, but we think are going to have a meaningful impact on development and growth in the state. I won't go into detail on all here. I'll just hit HB 894 at the top, the Housing Certainty Act, HB 548, and then I'll briefly discuss a couple of provisions from the Utility Relief Act and the Supporting Inclusive Community Adaptation Act. So starting with TOD bill, HB 894, this is the governor's recommitment to trying to develop TODs in Maryland, which is a follow-up from the Housing Expansion and Affordability Act a couple of years ago. It does a couple specific things to try to spur development, especially around state-owned lands and specific transit stations that have a higher frequency of service. So 2 funds get focused on transit stations with hourly service from 8 a.m. to 6 p.m. Monday through Friday. Those include the Enterprise Zone Fund and Medco's Strategic Infrastructure Revolving Loan Program. The revolving loan program will be specifically focused on developing state-owned land and adjacent to the rail stations with the frequency I mentioned above. The bill also eliminates off-street parking requirements for residential and mixed-use developments within a quarter mile of those frequented rail stations. And it also must allow mixed-use development or residential and appropriate commercial zones within half a mile of certain rail stations. It also gives local authority on environmental impact concerns, public and safety, and APFOs to local jurisdictions for those developments. And then finally, it preempts local zoning regulations on the land use classification, height, setback, and similar requirements specifically for MDOT-owned land that has a TOD plan approved by MDOT in coordination with the local government. And the local authority on the things I mentioned before, environmental impact, public safety and health, and APFO still apply there. Then moving on to the Housing Certainty Act. Maryland, for development rights, has widely been known as a late vesting state, meaning that at a point past the submission of an application from a developer for a particular development, zoning and regulations could change, meaning the developer may have to change stuff about their project before it can actually be built. This bill, and those rules were widely governed by court decisions of Maryland. This bill is the General Assembly's first big foray into shifting Maryland for specifically residential developments only to a early vesting state. So a housing development project application, whether it be the approval, denial, or conditional approval, is going to be governed only by the laws and regulations in effect when a complete application as defined by the bill is submitted by the developer. And then additionally, the bill goes into defining what a complete application means. It can include non-substantive errors, but it generally is all the things that a local jurisdiction needs to commit a substantive review of that application have to be present. It also changes the collection point for development fees and excise taxes to see here to near the end of the development. So when all the qualifications of a C&O permit have been or use and occupancy permit have been gathered. But a precondition of that can be a final inspection before the issuing or collection of those fees. Then for the Utility Relief Act, I promise I won't go into the entirety of the bill. I think it ended up being about 240 some pages. I don't want to take up the entire meeting, but there's a few quick things that I think for sustainable growth purposes are really important. One of which is the software implementation for local jurisdictions for an automated permit approval software for residential solar. Previously, that had to be adopted by all local jurisdictions by August 1st, 2025. Utility Relief Act pushed that back to August 1st of 2027, just to give a bit better on-ramp for local jurisdictions maybe struggling in the procurement of that software. And the bill also further defines what that software has to look like for each local jurisdiction, as well as give local jurisdictions the authority to do a follow-up inspection on top of the automatic approval process from that software. It also makes some changes to the CPCN process, the Certificate of Public Convenience and Necessity process from the Public Service Commission, primarily around transmission lines and studies to ensure that the proper route selection was selected. And then finally, it tasks the Power Plant and Research Program from the Department of Natural Resources to study, in consultation with the Department of the Environment and the Maryland Energy Administration, study and identify ways to streamline the permitting process for energy development in the state. A part of that study is identifying up to 50 priority energy sites that are suitable for new or expanded generating stations or energy storage devices. And they're going to be looking at brownfields, industrial sites surrounded by low population density, and sites with older decommissioned generating units that can be repowered or repurposed in some way. So really focusing in on a sustainable growth angle for better energy development within the state. And that study and its results will be submitted to the governor and the General Assembly by December 31st. And then finally, this is a DNR departmental, the Supporting Inclusive Community Adaptation Act. Primarily, it tasked DNR with establishing the Resilience Through Restoration Capital Grant Fund. That's going to provide equitable grants and funding to state agencies, local jurisdictions, and nonprofits for planning, design, construction, and adaptive management of nature-based restoration projects that aim to reduce the state's climate change vulnerabilities and enhance the resilience of local communities. There's also some guidance materials that DNR is set to develop and publish on their website. We see those as a great complement to the implementation of the planning principles and the new alignment to the comprehensive planning elements, as Chuck mentioned previously. And it also tasks DNR with identifying climate vulnerabilities on their own lands and evaluate opportunities to implement climate change mitigation and resilience projects. Next slide, please.
And Andrew, in light of time, we're going to just share that, and maybe you can, through the Q&A, respond to some of the questions that have come up so we can move on to the agency presentations, I think, if that works.
Yeah, that's fine.
Thank you. I see a few questions have come in around the legislative side. And just a reminder to everyone, we will be posting this entire presentation and the recording also. So you'll be able to have that information with you in the follow-up with these hot links. But we're continuing to monitor the Q&A and we'll respond to whatever we can. So thank you, Andrew. We're going to move straight into the agency updates next. And that will be all of the agencies that are presenting. And we'll start with MDOT, and Jeff Anderson is going to give us some highlights of what's happening at MDOT as it relates to this overall work. Thank you. Go ahead, Jeff.
Thank you, Secretary. You can go to the next slide. We heard already about the TOD bill. MDOT under this administration has really been ramping up our efforts to see development happen around transit. That helps us get more from our transit assets and creates communities with easy access to opportunity for Marylanders. So we're excited about what's happening with TOD. The piece of legislation is a big deal. We've also been working hard on a number of other ways to advance TOD. The TOD designation program is one of those. The program, we've really sort of been trying to revitalize and reinvigorate it and change the application process in June 2024. I think that's been very successful. We've seen a lot of interest. We've had a couple new designations. MDOT runs that process, but those designations, as was noted earlier, are made through this subcabinet. And so we've had great cooperation from the subcabinet. Designation does get you eligibility to MDOT's capital grant and revolving loan fund. It gets you points in the low-income housing tax credit program and a number of other benefits in terms of really getting MDOT's assistance in moving TOD forward. There's been a lot of interest. We also do know that there have been some limitations associated with staff capacity at the local level. We've been working with our partners at MDP to put tools online to be helpful for that, and then also providing direct technical assistance staff to staff. And private stakeholders, I think, are also sometimes unclear where to go with their interest in getting a TOD designation. They can always come to MDOT. We're happy to work with people directly and work with the localities that they're working in. So just, I think, good progress here and good progress on other fronts within TOD. So we've, I think, are getting really good momentum and hearing a lot of good feedback from both localities and the private sector. You can go to the next slide. The other thing I just wanted to briefly highlight was recognition that our team received here, for which we were very grateful from the subcabinet. The Maryland State Transportation Trails Strategic Plan. It won the Sustainable Growth Award for Policy. It's the first new trail plan in more than a decade from MDOT. It, I think, featured great stakeholder engagement. We just had so much excitement from all across Maryland around the trails plan, and I think it helped kind of coalesce the vision for trails in Maryland and the state's role, and helped clarify local and private roles. So we were very gratified to have that work recognized and all the great staff who worked on that. So those are a couple of quick updates here. I'm pleased to be here today. Thank you, Secretary.
Great. Thank you, Jeff. And final slide, if you want to get in hold of Jeff directly, you can do that. And if there's questions specific to what Jeff just, please put them in the Q&A. And once again, we'll try to respond as we can. So next up, we want to share with you what's happening over at the Department of Natural Resources. And we have Secretary Kurtz here with us to share this presentation with you. So Secretary Kurtz, over to you.
Thank you, Secretary Flora. Good morning, everyone. If you go to the next slide, please. So we wanted to talk to you about a few of our new initiatives that we're working on. And the first one I wanted to discuss was the Roots for Resilience initiative. And this was funded as part of the Climate Pollution Reduction Grant that was awarded to the state of Maryland. And one of the projects is the Roots for Resilience that this is going to fund. The goal of this project is to really think about how, when we're doing restoration activities, we're also building resilience for communities. And we've embedded several of the kind of like community engagement best practices within this project. And so what you'll see here is the project goals. This is what we're going to achieve by 2029. And the way that we're going to do that is by working with community groups, nonprofits, established partnerships across the Lower Eastern Shore and the Eastern Shore to ensure that we're able to get these projects installed. And by and large, all of these will be on private property. So we'll be getting water quality benefits, habitat benefits, but also building resilience for the property owners and the communities in which they sit. Next slide, please. And I also wanted to let everyone know one of the ways that the department works to really support the ecological function of the state is through grant making. And our Grants Gateway is open. The Grants Gateway has a wide range of projects that it funds for counties, nonprofits, landowners, private properties, et cetera. And right now the application is about to open. It opens July 15th. And then it'll be open through December 2026. There's a few different fund sources in there that have different closing dates. So definitely be mindful of that. And these funds, this is actually a space where we're actually aggregating several fund sources, whether that be state funds, federal funds, in order to fund these practices. Very similar to the practices that we have in Roots, or that we fund in Roots for Resilience, but this would be distributed all across the state. Next slide, please. And I wanted to touch on, and I think Andrew touched on, the Supporting Inclusive Community Adaptation Act already, so I'll jump down to Tremendous Maryland. Tremendous Maryland is a program of ours at the department where we do tree planting. And what we were able to do is actually learn from the 5 Million Trees program some best practices for supporting especially local government-driven tree plantings. And really being able to use some of the funding for maintenance and long-term stewardship of the sites after the trees are planted. Really boosting survivability is the best way for us, especially in our urban and suburban communities, to ensure that the trees are providing the maximum amount of benefit for those communities, whether that be heat reduction, clean water, et cetera. And so we've made those tweaks through the legislature to that program. Next slide. And that's the end of mine. So thank you all very much. Happy to take any questions.
Great, thanks, Secretary Kurtz. And once again, use the Q&A function for any questions you may have, and the Secretary or members of his team will do their best to either respond live or to take that back as we continue to be informed of what you all are thinking out there. Okay, on to the Department of Commerce. We have Jim Palmer representing Secretary Kolker today, and Jim's going to walk us through what's happening at Commerce. Jim, over to you.
Good morning. All right, I think next slide. Over the past year, Commerce has helped Maryland secure numerous economic development wins, including NatureCell, which is establishing a new stem cell research facility and 500 jobs in Baltimore City. Samsung Biologics put its first U.S. manufacturing facility in Rockville, which will retain 500 jobs and create some new ones. DoD contractor Lufco opened a new R&D facility around Aberdeen Proving Ground, adding 120 new jobs. And Silma Environmental Systems is opening a new medical waste recycling facility in Allegheny County, adding 75 new jobs. We also had a landmark announcement from AstraZeneca, which is investing $2 billion to expand its manufacturing operations in Frederick and Montgomery counties, which is the largest private investment in the state in over 10 years. In January, we announced that Sphere was bringing a new 6,000-seat music and entertainment arena to National Harbor. And just last month, we attended a groundbreaking for the future Sparrows Point Container Terminal, a $1.2 billion project which will create a state-of-the-art container terminal on part of the former Sparrows Point Bethlehem steel mill. When it's fully operational, the terminal will create more than 1,100 direct union jobs, with more than 8,000 direct, indirect, and induced jobs projected over the next decade. Next slide, please. The Decade Act 2026 was one of the major legislative wins for the Department of Commerce, and it contains several provisions impacting commerce and our programs. First, it extends the Build Our Future Innovation Infrastructure Grant Program, as well as the RISE Zone program, and moves these programs to MEDCO to align with that agency's focus on infrastructure. It moves the Sunny Day program, aka the Economic Development Opportunities Program Fund, to Commerce and rebrands it as the Strategic Closing Fund. In the past, this fund has been focused on business retention. The idea is now for it to be a tool for new business attraction as well. The Decade Act also increases the maximum amount of assistance that can be issued through Commerce's MEDAF program for several different capabilities. The Decade Act includes doubling the maximum amount of financial assistance that can be approved by the Secretary of Commerce without approval from the MEDAF authority, from $2.5 million to $5 million, and increases the maximum loan amount for a local economic development opportunity from $5 million to $7.5 million, among other changes. This bill also eliminates the requirement that local jurisdictions contribute a 10% financial match to the funding the state is putting up for a project, ensuring that jurisdictions will be able to participate regardless of the financial resources they have available. The next slide, please. Our budget highlights. I wanted to note a few highlights from the approved fiscal 2027 budget. These are some of the provisions that are specifically intended to bolster economic growth. First, the administration notes there are no new taxes or fees. The budget includes $8 million for the Western Maryland Future Investment Board and George Edwards Fund. As a reminder, money in this fund can only be used to award grants and provide loans to capital infrastructure projects and business development projects to improve the economic conditions in Western Maryland. There's also the $8 million for the Strategic Closing Fund I mentioned previously. There's funding for key commerce programs, which illustrate the wide range of assistance of Commerce provides. $17.5 million for MEDAF, $33.7 million for the Maryland State Arts Council, $20.4 million for the Maryland Tourism Development Board and the Office of Tourism Development, and $33.6 million for our key small business assistance programs, our Small Minority and Women-Owned Business Account, or SWMOBA, and the Maryland Small Business Development Authority, or MSBDFA. These highlights illustrate how Maryland Commerce supports a wide range of economic development opportunities from large projects to small business. And those are my slides. Thank you.
Wonderful. Thank you, Jim. Thanks for updating us on what's going on to grow our economy. So great news. Again, just use the Q&A if you have questions for Jim. And I see a few in there that perhaps the panelists can take a look at and respond to if you're able. So next up, we're going to go over to DHCD. And Julia Glantz, who is our who's Deputy Secretary, will do the presentation today. And I just want to note that Secretary Day, who is not able to be with us today, is our Vice Chair of the Subcabinet and very actively involved in our work also. But we're thrilled to have you jump in for the Secretary today, Julia. So over to you.
Thanks, Secretary Flora. Good morning, everybody. And thanks for letting me stand in for Secretary Day. Excited to be here to present a few updates from DHCD. So if you hit the next slide. We'd first like to provide an update on the implementation of the governor's Housing Starts Here executive order. And I think there should be some, you just tab through. DHCD, MDOT, and DGS are in the process of identifying state-owned properties suitable for housing development, paving the way for more homes to be built across Maryland. The executive order also promotes government efficiency. First, we're enhancing transparency and predictability in our financing process through the implementation of new technology within the housing financing arm of the department. And second, we're grateful to MDE and MDOT SHA for their partnership in updating their permitting processes, helping to bring more homes to market faster and improving transparency. We've learned that coordination is key to making housing happen, and that's why the executive order also directed DHCD to hire a new state housing ombudsman. Stephen Palmer started in January and has hit the ground running, already helping reduce delays with much needed housing projects and getting the balls rolling faster on others. This progress to create more housing will be reflected in our annual housing production targets reports, which will be released in January of each year. So you can go to the next slide. We're also doing work in Baltimore City through the Reinvest Baltimore, led by our new Assistant Secretary of Neighborhood Revitalization, Carrie Snyder, and her team. Governor Moore announced Reinvest Baltimore back in October 2024, which created the Baltimore Vacants Reinvestment Council and the Baltimore Vacants Reinvestment Initiative, with the goal of moving at least 5,000 vacant properties into homeownership or other positive outcomes by 2030. The council, which Secretary Day chairs, meets bi-monthly to review performance goals, discuss constraints, and strengthen collaboration around the shared goal of reducing vacants in Baltimore. The state provides the funding for this work through the BVRI, deploying $50 million in total capital annually to Baltimore City, the Maryland Stadium Authority, the Baltimore City Community Development Organizations to successfully redevelop vacant properties. We're already seeing results after just one round of awards. As of April 20th, 20 awardees have abated 39 vacant buildings, with 100 more under permit and 63 under site control. We'll be announcing the second round of awards in just a few weeks, and we're looking forward to continuing the progress on this key effort. Next slide. And last but not least, our incredible Main Street Maryland team has been hard at work supporting some of Maryland's most lovable spaces, our main streets. Over the last year, Christine McPherson and her team have been redesigning the program with a new 3-tier structure. Each of Maryland's 44 main streets falls into one of 3 categories: connected, aspiring, or designated. To help our main streets organizations thrive, we've launched a mentorship program pairing connected and aspiring Main Street managers with experienced designated leaders. And we're also preparing for the Maryland Main Street Conference, which will be held in Hagerstown this year on October 6th and 7th, following its first 2 successful years in Frederick and Easton. By far, the most exciting news for Main Streets is that Sykesville was recently awarded the prestigious Great American Main Street Award. This award from Main Street America is like the Grammys or the Oscars for Main Streets, awarded to just 3 main streets each year across the nation. This is only the second time that Maryland Main Streets have been awarded, and the last time it was Frederick in 2005. Sykesville is so incredibly deserving of this recognition. We're super proud. So that's all from us. Looking forward to answering questions throughout the meeting. Thank you so much.
Wonderful. Thank you, Julia. And I'm excited to see the Great American Main Street Award. Actually, the Main Street program that I ran a couple decades ago received that award also. It's just phenomenal. So
that was great.
Pikesville. Yeah, that's fabulous. Okay, let's move over to DGS. And if you have questions for DHCD, just put them in the Q&A. Over to DGS, and I believe Secretary Chaudhry, are you going to take this? You out there on mute, maybe?
I am, man.
There
I
you
am,
are.
Secretary. Thank you. Sorry, my computer doesn't play nicely with Zoom.
Okay.
Thank you very much. Just wanted to appreciate Secretary Flora for her and her team coordinating and collaborating on this particular subcabinet, and just wanted to go through these slides. Hopefully, it won't take very long. And just want to premise before we move. Actually, we can go ahead to the next slide. I can talk about it to the next slide. So this really refers to Executive Order 01-01 2025-19. I'm sure everyone has bookmarked that and loves that executive order, but I'll tell you what that is. It is addressing Maryland's affordable housing crisis. It was issued last year. And under the governor's executive order, it identifies and provides all the roles and responsibilities both to DHCD as well as to Department of General Services. And what that does is really, the gist of it is really doing a search and making a determination if there's any property that's surplus to the state's needs. Do an evaluation to make a determination if it should be used for affordable housing purposes, given the shortage of affordable housing that's needed across the state of Maryland. So the executive order requires both DHCD and DGS to work very closely with other executive department agencies, obviously with other with other state agencies, to identify state-owned land that is subject to the control and overview and oversight of DGS. Subject to be determined to the surplus to the state's needs, and could be appropriate for consideration for the development of housing. So obviously very, very well specifically defined. I will also say that it does require maintenance of a database of parcels of state-owned land identified appropriate for the development of housing. So here, we're just giving a little bit quick overview of what the work that's been conducted. And I really want to highlight the great work both at the DGS Office of Real Estate as well as the teams over at DHCD for their efforts in this regard. So the teams worked together very closely, did a very comprehensive search of all state-owned properties that no longer need it, which may be used for housing in the future. Initially reviewed nearly 4,200 properties owned by over 24 agencies. Really, there was ultimately in the end, when all that filtered through and made that determination, there were 7 departments and agencies identified 11 potential properties that could be further analyzed for housing in the following counties: Anne Arundel, Baltimore City and Baltimore County, Charles County, Prince George's County, and Wycomico County. So it really allowed us to do a deep dive based on the executive order to make that determination and really evaluate how we can best utilize our vacant property or no longer utilized property that we know will ultimately be surplus to the state's needs for the purposes of affordable housing. And if we go to the next slide, of the 11 properties that have been identified, 1 has already been placed on the market, and this is also coincides with existing law as well, which requires us to do this as well. And that particular property is 2100 Guilford Avenue, located in Baltimore City. So a request was put out there for any developers looking to develop the property for affordable housing, as well as any type of, I believe, mixed use as well. It is a 2.21 acre site. It is a former Department of Public Safety and Correctional Services parole and a pretrial facility there, parole and probation site. We've already gone through the process of the solicitation. We've already received bids, and we're actually in the technical review stages of that right now. So it's currently in the review process. Obviously, there is additional community outreach and engagement. Obviously, with any type of housing, we want to make sure we do that as well, especially when it's state property. So we're doing that extensively as well, and that feedback will be taken into consideration as part of the review process. And we'll be ultimately looking to have a selection for a developer for this property either in late 2026 or early 2027, at least at this time. But this particular is the first one that the state's done to really focus, surplus state property in conformity with law and with the governor's new executive order. And this will be used as a template for other offerings and other properties as well. So I know I really want to appreciate the DGS team and the DHCD team and the Maryland Department of Planning team that worked very closely on this. It took a lot of effort to get to this point to be able to set up. The first is always the hardest, right? To set up the challenge, and it's a challenge to be able to get to that point. But I think we did a really great job in getting and setting up a template for success in the future. So for future development of sites as we move forward. So it's a great opportunity. The next couple of slides, I think, just give a little bit more background on this particular site. If we go to the next slide, just gives a quick overview of the site here. It's located here in Baltimore City. As an example, since it is state-owned property, Maryland Capitol Police continues to maintain safety and security of the site. And you can see that there's a fence here and securing the site. We also have some of the maintenance issues there. Our DGS Office of Facilities Management also responds to that and coordinates on that as well. And then we've got a community engagement plan we'll be implementing as well on this site to make sure we've got a good methodology going forward as we start to review our proposals and ultimately hope to make a selection end of this year, early next year on redevelopment of the site. And I think the final slide we have here ultimately gives just a quick overview, just an aerial view of where we are in the property right now, and the parking lot, adjacent parking lot to it as well, and just the fact that it is, it's a good depiction here of the aerial photography showing that it is in a community, right, and that is one of the factors that made it a good fit for affordable housing in this particular area, or housing or mixed use potential, just in the fact that it's in a neighborhood and there's a lot of housing and opportunities that could be utilized for this particular site. So great work being done behind the scenes, to address the state's housing shortages. And I really want to thank the governor for his leadership and the executive order, and for all our partner agencies for the collaboration that they've done and to do this. And as we continue to maintain that database, you'll see more of these proposals going over in the future, and for the development of affordable housing. And Secretary Flora, looking forward to having you and others as we move forward on any type of redevelopment and groundbreaking as we move forward. So very excited about this.
Great. Thanks, Secretary Chaudhry, and exciting work. And I think the theme that hopefully people are hearing is this incredible amount of coordination, collaboration across agencies that's occurring. And I think that just keeps popping up with all of these. Next up, we're going to go to MDEM. And the State Chief Resiliency Officer, Mike Henson, is here representing Secretary Strickland today. And over to you, Mike, to share with us what's happening in your world. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Secretary. And what a good segue talking about agencies working together. As was mentioned earlier in the presentation here today, the Maryland Statewide Resilience Strategy has been released. Just to give a little background on that, when the Maryland Office of Resilience was established in its enabling legislation, as well as in September of 2024, there was an executive order related to strengthening resilience for the state of Maryland. And both of those things, it was clearly stated that the statewide resilience strategy was a priority item that needed to be completed, and that has been completed. I won't go into all the details on this slide for the sake of time, but I will say that a couple things I just want to point out real quick here are we had to establish the shared pictures of hazards and stressors. And hazards is very easy. We as a department here at the Maryland Department of Emergency Management have had those through our hazard mitigation plan, which we've had for years and years here. But the stressors we had to work on a little bit, which were, as people are aware, stressors are chronic, ongoing structural challenges that can harm communities during everyday blue sky periods. And can exacerbate the impacts of hazards when they do occur. It can also make it tougher to recover from those hazards. You can see some other things that were here that were outcomes we were looking for in the strategy, and we think we were able to do that successfully. And to Secretary Flora's point about working across agencies, we had 22 standalone agencies involved, as well as 2 administrations, 120 stakeholders in total, academia, private sector, nonprofits involved. So it's a very collaborative process to make sure that this wasn't a plan or a strategy made to sit on a shelf or done in a vacuum. And so we're very appreciative to all those partners who were part of creating it and all those partners who will continue to be a part of implementing it. Next slide. So in that strategy, there are 20 goals that are presented, and in order to meet those 20 goals, there are 50 recommended actions. Obviously, we don't have the time to go over those all today, but I just want to call out a few that are on the screen here that specifically deal with sustainable growth within the state of Maryland. This first one is talking about a statewide funding table and need to create this interagency funding table in order to have good capital stacks to ensure that we get the best return on investment while meeting intended outcomes of state and local planning efforts. The second one here, similar to the recommendation above, when investing in resilience work, we need to make sure that we're considering the areas that are most vulnerable to threats, especially areas where overlapping or cascading vulnerabilities exist. Then this third one, pretty self-explanatory, but too often resilience is forgotten about until a threat has already occurred or is imminent. And by shifting the resilience discussion to earlier in the process, we can greatly improve the safety and strength of our communities. And then specific to that is this last one here, where we want to ensure that in our work with local technical assistance and other state agencies that are involved in resilience, we're supporting local governments in implementing the resilience planning principle that was spoken to earlier. And we want to make sure that when they're seeking assistance or expertise, they're getting what they need, and that state agencies are working together behind the scenes to make that process more seamless. Next slide. All right. So some non-resilient strategy items I just wanted to call out real quick. We know not everyone is as locked into the FEMA Review Council as we are here at the Maryland Department of Emergency Management, but I did want to call out one point that's of particular interest to people who are interested in these topics. The council has proposed some fairly substantial changes to the way recovery and mitigation programs would run across the country in a way that's very impactful in post-disaster planning. And in post-disaster planning, we oftentimes see that there can be significant changes to land use and funding for rebuilding and repurposing. So nothing is decided yet, but there's just something I wanted to highlight for folks to be aware of, and also let you know that Maryland Department of Emergency Management has provided comments through the feedback process that FEMA has allowed for this, as well as I know other state entities have as well. And then the last thing I just want to mention is the hazard mitigation plan for the state is in the final phase of completion for our most recent update. This is a really important document, not only for us at the state, but a lot of the information is used by locals. Every state and every county needs to have these plans approved by FEMA in order to be eligible for a lot of funding types pre and post disaster. And so a lot of locals use this information as well. So really, this is like a cascading planning effort that's about to be wrapped up on time. And we're very, very helpful, or excuse me, thankful for all the agency partners who have helped us with that, as well as any people who were involved in any of the public planning sessions we had for that. And so with that, I'll be happy to take any questions later on, or through the Q&A, I mean. Thanks.
Great. Thanks, Mike. Thank you. And yeah, if you have questions for Mike, put them in the Q&A and he'll do his best with his team to respond to those. Next up, we have MDA, or I think misspelled on here, MAD. I hope you're not mad, Harrison. So we have Harrison Palmer, Chief of Staff for Secretary Addicks, who's going to share with us some highlights from MDA. Go ahead, Harrison. Thank you.
Great. Thank you, Secretary.
Oh, it is mad. Okay.
It is mad. We are mad in the best way at the Department of Agriculture. When we look at sustainable growth in the ag sector, it looks a little bit different because we're not getting any new farmland. So we have to really evaluate ways that we can preserve and maintain and optimize the farmland that exists in the state and keep farmers farming, keep food on the table. We didn't include any slides about our Maryland Ag Land Preservation Foundation program because I think that it's relatively well known that we have one of the nation's leading farmland preservation programs right here in Maryland. We have exceeded all of the goals that we've set forward to achieve in land preservation, really with the idea of recognizing that, as previously mentioned, we're not getting any more farmland. But today I want to talk about a couple different ways that we're looking at other means of preservation of farmland outside of sort of these statutory and regulatory programs. But what we recognize as the most effective way to preserve a farm is to keep it profitable and keep it sustainable. And so one of the ways that we have looked into the profitability concept is by expanding our previous marketing division into now the Marketing and Agricultural Development division to really hone in on the opportunities to best promote the great work that farmers do here in the state. If you can see on the left side of the screen, we've got our revamped Maryland's Best logo, which you'll see on a lot of agricultural products. We've got plenty of signage that's going to be going out to farms so that you can recognize what that logo means when you're at a farmer's market or you see it on a menu. But how do we as a state prioritize and emphasize many of these value-added products, many of these direct consumer products that are coming off of Maryland farms, and then in the trickle-down effect, increasing the viability and profitability of those farms who are expanding, diversifying their operations to meet the need of our population here in the state. We hired a value-added ag specialist here at the department a couple of years ago to help really navigate the regulatory structure around value-added agriculture. Many of the regulations for folks that are going away from sort of the conventional cropping models and into this direct-to-consumer model, one of the major challenges we have are a lot of the processes are not regulated at the Department of Agriculture, but they may fall into health or environment or many of these other agencies that we're proud to be able to partner with and help farmers navigate those processes. But he developed a statewide guidance and analysis document for value-added agriculture and agritourism that really broke down a lot of those barriers and helped provide this step-by-step guide for farmers when they're going into value-added agriculture for what they need to be aware of and what they need to know. So we're making the investments into helping farmers navigate the processes that we have here in the state, providing that producer education, providing consumer education around Maryland agricultural products, and then investing obviously into our food access programs, both the Certified Local Farm and Fish program, Farmers Market Nutrition program. We recently transitioned the Maryland Market Money program to the department and are honing in on how we make the best use of each of these programs that are statutorily created to have the best on-the-ground impact to keep farms viable. We can go to the next slide, please. We talked a bit about the preservation side and what that means on the profitability component, but looking at the sustainability side, if farms are washing out and losing topsoil and not engaging in the great conservation programs that we have in the state, we recognize that we're at risk for exactly what Mike was talking about in the MDEM conversation. When you have emergencies, sometimes it's too late. So we're getting ahead of that in the conservation mindset. Similar to the farmland preservation programs, we're a national leader in conservation. And that's in part due to the state's voluntary conservation programs that have proven to be so successful in engaging farmers and getting the buy-in that conservation is not just good for your farm and your neighbors and the watershed in the bay, it's good for your bottom line. And so our Maryland Ag Cost Share program is sort of the key highlight to partner with the federal programs through the Natural Resource Conservation Service at USDA. But it creates this cost sharing model where we are going to help support the implementation of best management practices on farmland to preserve the land, the quality of the land, the quality of the soil, not only to support the farmer themselves, but also to support the breadth of the watershed and the environment. Our cover crop program, again, a national leader in adoption. We're looking forward to a conference we're hosting next week with several secretaries of agriculture from the southern states to really highlight and showcase how critical this cover crop program has been for Maryland and what it's meant for not only our watershed goals, but for our farmers and why it's so critical for their operations and their profitability to invest in the mindset of conservation. We'll go to the next slide, please. And I'll say last and not least, as we're looking forward to what's coming next, we're continuing to really have productive conversations with MDEM, really have these productive conversations with the Harry Hughes Center for Agroecology, and our partners across the state. When we're looking at climate resiliency and what that means in Maryland agriculture, we are going through a strategic planning process for our Office of Resource Conservation that dives into this climate resilience mindset at the forefront and how we pair our conservation programs into that. I'll say one of the unique components you'll see in the center of this table here, the LEAF program, the Leaders in Environmentally Engaged Farming program that came out of the Governor's Bay Legacy Act 2025. This program is designed to capture not just the conservation components that go into agriculture and giving that producer education on what conservation can look like on the farm, but it's a consumer-minded program as well, where the consumer will see a LEAF certification on the farm and recognize not just the conservation projects that they're getting into, but also the community best practices. How do we bring the community engagement into agriculture? How do we entail service on boards and commissions, service to the community, direct to consumer marketing, a lot of these different evaluations of what the critical needs of agriculture are and how we educate the public and what those priorities can be. So I will say in the sustainable growth concept, we're looking at how we grow the profitability and operability of our farms to sustain their operations, preserve the farmland itself through our actual programs of the MALC program, but also putting the ball into the farmer's court to help empower them to sustain themselves through the profitability mindset and margin as we continue to see Maryland agriculture evolve over time. So, Secretary, thank you for the time, and I will look to the chat to answer any questions.
Thank you. Yeah, a lot of great work coming on. We'll keep moving and pop over to MDE and Secretary McIlwain, who's been waiting patiently. Time for you to share with us what's going on with your agency.
Oh, thank you. Thank you. Well, there's a lot of presentations, so I'll try not to go too long. Let me just start by saying good morning to everyone. I don't particularly have a whole lot of projects to share specifically, but I do want to share the importance of our environmental work and how it plays a part when we think about sustainable growth. We don't have a lot of projects, but we do invest in a lot of communities. That's really what we do. So let's see. I think we can go. Well, no, let's stay on there for a second. I do want to say that, we're doing everything that we can to protect the environment while at the same time helping to grow the economy. There's never a win-win. I've said every time I do this presentation because it's true. I think in Maryland, we have proof that a healthy environment and a strong economy can actually grow together. They always do, and they always will. And now we can go to the next slide. You can see by these numbers here that our economy, it does run on a clean environment. We're supporting over $3.2 billion in tourism every single year. It is simply because our waterways are healthy. And that's why it's really important that we are doing the work that we are doing, because tourists and everybody across the country, across the world, they want to come to Maryland because Maryland is beautiful. And so we're trying to help it stay beautiful. And so that is why, when Maryland is building and doing all the great things that we've talked about today to grow the economy and to grow communities, it's all of these things work together. And again, all of this is done because of the work that we're doing as well. So yes, we have strong environmental standards, but those standards are not slowing down the great work of Maryland. Next. This is one of the areas that most people don't really see and most people don't really talk about, but yet all of us really depend on it. And what I'm talking about right now is what you see here is water infrastructure investment. We do have clean water coming out of our tap, and wastewater is safely treated before it reaches the bay. And again, that's how we keep Maryland clean and beautiful, but it doesn't happen by accident. It really does take serious investment on behalf of Maryland. And I'm happy to tell you that our agency, MDE, we put hundreds of millions of dollars to work in every community every single year. And I won't repeat the numbers, but you can see them right here. This is really important, and this is how we ensure that when you think about a pipe, we're making sure that those pipes are getting replaced before they fail. So we're doing a lot of proactive work, and we're not so reactive. We're making sure that treatment plants are upgraded before it starts polluting. So again, this is how we contribute to sustainable growth. We're a little behind the scenes, but again, we're making sure that all the communities have all the infrastructure that it needs to thrive. Next slide. And finally, when we look ahead and you see this image, it's really nice. That's a grandfather and a grandchild fishing. And that child is going to inherit all the decisions that we're making today about our climate. The children of our future they really are depending on us to present to them and hand over a beautiful earth. And that's, again, why we're doing all the work that we're doing to fight climate change and some of the climate challenges that we have. We are really cleaning up pollution in all ways. We're focusing on buildings. We're focusing on clean transportation. And again, this is why this transition that we have to make sure that we are successful in. When you think about the clean energy transition, climate change, our climate goals, it's because we're doing it for the good of the climate. Next slide and final slide. So again, I'll just keep it short. Everything that we do at MDE, it just comes back to this. We're here to clean the water, clean the air, and make sure that your communities, our communities, are resilient. And we're proud to be a partner with the Sustainable Growth Committee and this whole, all that we're doing together, this forum, because again, we're not here to impede economic growth. But everything that we do is because we want to make sure that we're growing sustainably in Maryland and that we're keeping it clean and beautiful. So thank you. And any questions, I'm here to answer at the end. Thank you.
Wonderful. Thank you, Secretary McIlwain, for being with us here today and reminding us that all of that great work, continues to lead back to thriving communities and healthy people and future generations. It's all what we're about. So thank you. Speaking of future generations, last but not least of our agency presentations, we have Secretary Kiros Livanis, who is going to talk to us about higher education and what could be more important, but how we are preparing our next generation. So, Interim Secretary, would you please go ahead?
Thank you so much, Secretary Flora. Completely agreed. Buenos dias again to everyone. I want to extend my gratitude before jumping in again to our capital finance analyst, Dan Schuster, who has been actively engaged in this space. I'm excited to provide updates today on the 2026-2030 Maryland State Plan for Higher Education, as it represents a foundational roadmap for the state's post-secondary system over the next 4 years. And I can tell, listening to the presentations from my colleagues who preceded me, that we really have been listening to Governor Moore's call and listening to him when he says partnership produces progress. So rather than viewing higher education policy in a silo, we designed this plan with the understanding that our institutions of post-secondary education are core physical and economic anchors in Maryland's communities. Our goal, as you can see, is an affordable contemporary system that equips every Marylander to thrive in our dynamic economy. It drives innovation to strengthen our long-term economic competitiveness, a mission that directly mirrors the economic goals of this subcabinet. We didn't build this plan in a vacuum. Since launching the development process last year, we have engaged and surveyed partners across the state, explicitly building on ongoing conversations with sister agencies like the Department of Labor, the Department of Commerce, Governor's Office for Children, the Maryland State Department of Education, Governor's Workforce Development Board, and so many others. We've also engaged with institutional leaders, industry and business advocates, community-based organizations, all to ensure that our priorities ultimately match the reality on the ground. At the end of the day, I can tell you that this plan is fully, it is developed. We are excited to bring the plan before the Maryland Higher Education Commission on June 24th for adoption, and we hope that it will serve as a shared resource for all of our cross-agency initiatives. On the next slide, you'll see that we are proposing 3 goals. Our first priority in the state plan is increasing overall post-secondary attainment in the state. And so what does that mean? We want to ensure that more Marylanders can afford affordable credentials and degrees that open doors to social and economic mobility. This is how we build the talent pool that we know we need and that supports the business growth and community resilience goals championed by our sister agencies like the Department of Commerce and DHCD. We're also shifting the focus towards post-completion success. We believe in access and we want to increase access, and we believe in completion. We want to make sure that those who walk through our doors graduate, but we also want to make sure that once you graduate with a degree or credential that you know what your next steps are. So we know that these credentials must serve as a direct catalyst for upward mobility, and we want to ensure that the talent we cultivate here in the state can immediately step into living wage jobs in the regions where they study, retaining that talent here in the state of Maryland. That is also why we're here today. We want to integrate Maryland's post-secondary ecosystem into a unified whole of government strategy by aligning our post-secondary ecosystem with the state's priority sectors, whether they're the lighthouse sectors or priority sectors determined by colleagues in labor. We can generate cross-agency solutions to solve public challenges. So very excited about what that means for us. Other examples are leveraging research with MDE and DNR on climate resilience, or working with our sister agencies to meet those emerging industry demands related to aerospace, biotechnology, cybersecurity, and quantum. Finally, on our last slide, you'll see that when we map our goals to the Subcabinet Sustainable Growth Framework, they align directly with the principles of economy and equity. We address equity by expanding access to affordable post-secondary education with a clear return on investment, and we address the economy principles by matching instruction directly with workforce needs, and that'll fuel local job growth. Moving forward, as we transition towards implementation, we will measure progress, including specific targets for equity, innovation, and measuring that return on investment. These indicators will provide us valuable data and sharing opportunities to complement the dashboard that we know the Sustainable Growth Cabinet uses. Ultimately, for us, this isn't just policy, it dictates capital deployment as well. We use the Commission's statutory responsibility to review and recommend operating and capital budgets to align investments directly with statewide priorities. Hopefully, you can see this strategy in action right now through our physical footprint. We are directing resources toward concrete capital projects designed for regional workforce training needs. Some of those examples include new facilities at Howard Community College and Chesapeake College, with similar regional projects actively being planned elsewhere across the state. This is how we use higher education to physically anchor our work and promote sustainable regional development. So again, thank you so much, and happy to answer any questions.
Thank you so much. We really appreciate it. I always hate to use the word interim secretary, Kiaras Lavanas. Thank you for being with us today and sharing this with us, keeping us in mind the future generation, and thrilled to see economy and equity being weaved in from our principles. Fantastic. Okay, we are into the next segment, which I will take and move along. But in terms of the Department of Planning specifically, some of you that have been following us are aware of the fact that we basically 2 sessions ago introduced the Sustainable Growth Planning Principles. And these have become the framework by which we are really not only organizing our agency, but also working with other agencies through the Subcabinet and at the local level through Comprehensive Plan, because these were just added as a replacement of the previous elements in Comprehensive Plan legislation to now being the primary in terms of the elements. And we've been doing regional roundtables with planners across the state to basically engage them around this. But I saw a question earlier about the UN Sustainable Development Goals. And in fact, these principles reflect essentially multiple methods that are out there, not only nationally, but globally, in terms of sort of how do we think about sustainability and applying it to a sustainable growth model. So as we looked at these very carefully and in a way that would create something that would be simple, and as a frame, the intent is to really pick up on multiple aspects of what do we mean by sustainability within our land use growth policy. And so that was considered along with several others in terms of how we ended up with these final 8 principles and the intent statements associated with them, but specifically trying to give flexibility to how they are utilized not only by sister agencies, but also on the local level, because we are moving less away from overly prescriptive and more towards performance-based ways of thinking about all of these topics. So these are the principles. They're available on our website, and they are very much the current frame that's being used, not only with our agency, but as we're advocating and moving it forward with how we connect with other agencies and at the local level. So next slide. Just touch real quick on this model. You know, not only are we trying to look across the legislative and statutory requirements, but really using that same frame across all the work that we do, and then creating model ordinances, guidance materials as an expansion of our sustainable growth implementation guide and tools, creating all of those model ordinances and guidances to help others put these into implementation. And we've just actually this week concluded our last roundtable, but we may be doing more in the fall virtually. Final slide for us is just know that there are multiple tools out there. If you're interested in how we are applying this on the implementation side of what does sustainable growth look like in Maryland, not only did we develop what I think of as the primer, the 101, everything you need to know at a high level about sustainable growth in the implementation guide that we released last year, but we're also now applying that through a dashboard of metrics to sort of begin to measure what that looks like and what are the metrics we can be using to account for ourselves and what sustainable growth looks like in Maryland in a true quantifiable method to whatever extent possible. Case study examples, a lot of that is coming through our awards program, but then other examples we're seeing to show others how these are being applied at the local level, particularly, and at the state level, and then of course other resources all of that's on our webpage. And I will just keep us moving. The next slides are just a preview of what's coming up with the awards this year. I'll turn it to Maggie to do that. Over to you, Maggie.
Yeah, good morning, everyone. Again. So to keep this really brief, we just wanted to let you know that our upcoming 2027 is going to be starting in just a few short months. Quick refresher on the categories that we have. We have a leadership, a project, and a policy category. And this is a really great opportunity to present some of this incredible work happening across our state in front of our governor. So it's a really, really great platform. We had 3 incredible winners this year. The Montgomery County Community Planning Academy won our leadership award. The residences at Forest Glen were our project winners. And as mentioned by Jeff a little earlier, Transportation Trail Strategic Plan from MDOT won the policy award. So we are looking forward to another batch of really, really great nominations come this summer. So for the 2027 season, our nomination window will begin August 1st and run through the end of September. And we plan to have a March ceremony in spring of 27. And for any more information, you can visit our webpage, which will be linked in this slide. All right, that's all. Thank you.
Great. Thank you to Maggie Courier and to Mary Doughton, who were responsible for helping to organize all of the presentations today, and Mary for keeping the logistics running also on this webinar Zoom format platform. Appreciate all the work that went into that. And so big kudos to you all. So on the final closing round, I think we've been doing a fairly good job with the Q&A, actually, as I've been monitoring that with a lot of questions answered. But I'm just going to go down through the various agencies and just see if you all have any closing thoughts or anything that you would like to respond to as we go through that. And then the other reminder I want to do before we do that is that the recording from today, the presentation, and the Q&A will all be posted on our Sustainable Growth Subcabinet webpage. And so anyone that was viewing today that wants to share it or go back to it, you'll be able to find all of that information posted within the next few days, as soon as we can get those things happening. So now I always like to go in reverse order. So let's start with the National Center for Smart Growth to see if Dr. Heil has any closing thoughts or responses to anything that we've seen in the Q&A.
No, nothing, but thank you for the great meeting. It was great to hear more about what my colleagues are up to.
Wonderful. Thank you. So anyone from the governor's office, I don't think joined, but they're staying very close. And obviously having the governor directly engaged in our awards program has been phenomenal. He's always so excited to see the great work that's going on out there in Maryland. So the next one up, Assistant Secretary, DHCD, Office of Neighborhood Revitalization. I believe Carrie was not with us. Was Kevin with us? Anybody want to say anything there? I think we'll let Julia weigh in on that one and cover both bases in a bit. Over to MDOT, Jeff Anderson, any?
Just appreciated the questions on TOD and happy to follow up with anyone who's got further information needs. Thank you.
Wonderful. Thank you. And I know that Secretary Kurtz had to jump off a few minutes ago, so he is not here, but glad we had him with us as long as we could. I don't believe anyone from labor joined us. Am I missing anybody? Nope, I don't think so. Raise your hand if I did. And then over to higher ed, Interim Secretary Kiros Libanis. Any closing thoughts? Is she still with us? Perhaps not. We'll keep moving. Health was not with us today that I can recall. And over to DGS, closing thoughts, Secretary Chaudhry. Or Wendy, if you're still here. Anything else? Okay, keep moving. Over to MDE, Secretary McIlwain. Any other closing thoughts or responses to Q&A?
No, thank you. It was good hearing the perspective from all of my colleagues and how, all of this is working together and how we're working together to do the great things I talked about. So thank you.
Thank you, Secretary. Yeah, I once again, it was just so great to see how many of the agencies all of our work can't be done in a silo. There's so much coordination, collaboration going on. Thank you.
That's right.
Over to MDEM. Mike, any closing thoughts or responses to what you saw in the Q&A?
Nothing additional other than just say thank you for the opportunity, and we enjoy that everybody's enthusiastic and engaged in these topics.
Thank you. Over to Commerce, Jim.
Yes, I did get a question about manufacturing, and my manufacturing representative, Ben McLaughlin, gave me a rather long answer. So maybe we don't want to say it here, but the question was, how can small and medium-sized manufacturers prepare for future sustainability while aligning with state goals? And there are plenty of ways that they can. The shortest answer I can think of is manufacturers not only adopt sustainability to be sustainable, but because it actually can lower their costs. So we can work out a longer answer and I guess get it back to the person who asked.
Appreciate that. That would be great. Thank you, Jim. Over to DBM. I'm looking to see if Allison or anyone ended up joining us. I don't think so.
Yes. So Paul Raiders here, representing DBM. How's it going? I wasn't on the call earlier, but I just want to say on behalf of DBM, thank you to Secretary Flora, planning staff, and subcabinet members for your leadership. DBM remains fully committed to our partnership here, and we want to work together so that our investments today build a sustainable, fiscally sound state. Thank you again to everyone on the staff and everyone on the call and dedication to these efforts.
Great. Thanks for being with us, Paul. Glad you were able to join. Appreciate it. MDA, let me see. Harrison, any other additional responses for you?
Nothing additional here, Secretary. Would I echo Paul's thanks to your leadership and the leadership of this full subcabinet to really bring a lot of diverse voices to the table as we look to the future. So thank you.
Wonderful. Thank you. And over to DHCD, Deputy Secretary Julia Glantz.
Yeah, nothing additional outside of I did my best to answer the questions in the chat. Happy to follow up with anybody that needs additional details. But I like where everybody's head is at in the chat, and looking forward to continuing to work with all of you. Thank you.
Wonderful. Thank you. Thanks for being here. And I see Leah Shepard's with us with DNR. Leah, anything you want to add on behalf of the Secretary?
Thank you for the time today. We were happy to participate. And if there are additional questions that weren't asked during the webinar, we're happy to field them after. Thank you so much.
Wonderful. Thank you. Okay, we did it, everyone. It is 10:57. We got through everything. For those of you out there, thank you for joining us today and for your interest in this topic. Again, there's the webpage link. We'll be sending everything out, and we have everyone that registered. We have your names and everything. So really appreciate not only all the participants, the folks that helped us put this together, and then of course all of our public and attendees out there who took their time today to join us and hear what's happening with sustainable growth in Maryland and the work of the Sustainable Growth Subcabinet that's been around for quite some time. So I'm excited to see the energy of all of the agencies and everyone on this topic. So thank you all. Have a really great day and great weekend. Appreciate you all. Thanks for being here. Take care, and we are adjourned. Bye, everyone.